All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our last webinar of the May 2020 and Spring 2020 semester. We are heading into summer full blast, and I'm excited to have everyone here. My name is Lauren, and I'm with the Kelley Indianapolis Career Services office. And today I'm joined by 4 alumni from IU and from the Kelley School of Business. And we are talking about succeeding in an uncertain market, and we're going to have a great conversation today about the job tactics and tips and tricks that we're going to be utilizing in order to make ourselves the most marketable and successful in this new uncertain market, wherever it ends up taking us. So I'd like to have our panelists start by introducing themselves. And just as a reminder too, you have the option on the lower bottom part of your screen to enter questions into the chat box. And I'll be monitoring that during the session too. So feel free to get those questions in there and we'll feed them in during our conversation. So Jamie, will you go ahead and start and we'll just kind of go to our left.
Sure, I'm Jamie Jansen. I am currently a program manager at One America Financial Partners in our marketing operations department. Graduated from the Kelley School with a marketing degree in 2008.
Karen, do you want to go next?
Yes, wasn't sure which one was on your left, so.
Good call, thank you. I'll just call everyone out, how about that?
Here we go, all right, perfect, yes. I'm Karen Woods. I'm the Vice President of Operations for our Social Analytics Research Department at a company called MarketCast. We have an Indianapolis office, but our headquarters is in Los Angeles. And I graduated with a marketing degree in the spring of 2009.
Eric, you want to go next?
Yeah, Eric Compton. I am a manager in the client success department at Angie's List and received my MBA from the Kelley School in 2011.
Awesome. And last but not least, Melissa.
Hi, I'm Melissa Kunkel, and I'm an assurance manager with Ernst & Young here in Indianapolis. I graduated from Kelley Indianapolis in 2008, as well as in 2011 with my master's in accounting.
Awesome. So we got a double graduate down here. Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining me so much. And I wanted to kick off our conversation this morning and talk a little bit about some job search tactics, since that's really what's on the forefront of a lot of our students' minds, especially those in the May 2020 graduating class. So I wanted to ask, what resources did you find helpful during such a difficult time? And feel free, resources can be very broad. It can be people, anything like that.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. I would say, and I'll probably reference this several times on the call, on leveraging your network and the people that you know, whether that's other students or other people that you've met along the way throughout your life, really leveraging that network and just having the conversations. I know with the uncertainty in 2008 and not really knowing exactly what I wanted to do. Really having those conversations. I had a lot of coffee and lunch meetings with people who are already in the workforce and really just gathering information and picking their brains and finding out as much as I could about their experiences in the workplace.
I think LinkedIn is a really valuable tool in addition to the career services and I use it a ton when I just want to see if I know somebody who works somewhere, because then I can usually get, a contact or a friend who knows someone who works there. I reached out to Jamie yesterday just because I knew we were going to be on this together and connected on LinkedIn and, finding those ways, to connect with people who know others through LinkedIn. Also just, there's a lot of job postings on there, and especially when it comes to marketing roles, sales roles, those kinds of things, there's a lot on there. It's my first go-to these days, especially. So I think that, building out that network, finding the students that you already know, finding graduates that you have had classes with in previous years that are already out in the job force that would remember that project you collaborated on, and might be able to just, be either a contact, but also maybe a reference, as well as you're trying to, apply. They may be able to connect you with the hiring manager through LinkedIn as well. So there's a lot of ways that you can connect. A lot of times you can also find who the hiring managers are if there's a job posting on LinkedIn, and you may be able to connect with them there as well. And I do a lot of hiring myself, and I think it's always really cool when I see that someone's checked me out on LinkedIn before we have an interview or something, because I know that they're doing their homework. I know it's going to be a better conversation generally if they have already, looked me up, or, looking up other people at our company. And my bosses talk about the same thing. They're like, oh, Adam's doing his homework, and he's looked at all of our profiles. So, that really does set the tone quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that from you. We actually had a huge session on how to utilize your LinkedIn profile about 2 weeks ago. So I think you're echoing so much of what we talked about, but definitely thank you, Karen.
Yeah, I agree with both of those sentiments. And for me, absolutely the Kelley Career Services were tremendously helpful. And especially if hey, I'm really interested in these companies, finding somebody that, there's an alumni more than likely that's at a lot of companies, certainly in the Indianapolis area. LinkedIn has been tremendous for my career. And prior to the job that I've been in now for almost 10 years, I was a recruiter for a period of time, and used LinkedIn quite a bit as a recruiter. And our company at Angie's List, I don't want to say exclusively get our candidates from LinkedIn, but we get a tremendous amount from LinkedIn, and also employee referrals and things like that. So all of those have been tremendous. And network. People are very willing to help somebody out in their career by and large. So if you just say, hey, I want to find out more about what you do, what your company is all about, you just can't replace that type of research by searching online and looking up a company.
Another plus one for networking. I think a few additional things to add would be, first, try to maintain those relationships. And second, don't always go into the intent of, okay, I only want this job at this company, so I should only network with these people. Think of it as information gathering. And like Eric mentioned, everyone's always willing to help. And it's really empowering and engaging, and people enjoy being able to kind of help that next generation move forward in their careers. And so I think in the COVID-19 era, maybe tailoring your approach a little bit and saying, hey, can we jump on a virtual coffee chat? Or I'd love to, that way it's not all via email or phone call, to try to really bring that personal connection. People are happy to do that. They're craving it right now. And so I think that's one thing I would recommend to add. The second item in the Kelley Career Services, which I know was already mentioned, is utilizing the, I think they were informal practice mock interviews. That's actually how I got my job with EY. During my master's program, I did a practice interview with EY just to kind of really network, but also to get comfortable and build up my confidence. And then through that process, I just kind of skipped on through to the office interviews. And so taking all those resources that are available through you, that are being provided, and that your degree is really, laying out the framework for you is going to be really impactful for your future.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Melissa. And guess what? We are still doing that. We have mock interviews that happen in the spring and in the fall. So stay tuned. We will be marketing those later with those mock interviews with the companies.
And you may see me there. I usually try to go to campus whenever I can for those. So
yeah.
Now as the interviewer.
Awesome.
I'd be happy to volunteer myself to do that as well. So
all right, Karen, I'm getting you written down for that. Awesome. Well, I wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about when you started researching these companies and creating target lists for who you wanted to reach out to. What kind of criteria were you looking at when you were researching potential organizations, companies?
I'll start. So when I graduated, I knew I wanted to do accounting, but I wasn't sure exactly what. At the time, I didn't think I wanted to do public accounting. And so I had a lot of corporations and certain criteria that I was targeting. But given the timeline of everything that was going on and the reductions that some companies were facing and not hiring as many people, I really expanded my criteria. And so that's one thing I would encourage all of you students to do is think through, what other avenues, if you think about what's my overall goal, what are the other things, and think of like a giant Venn diagram that all kind of intersect. How can I get into a certain industry? How can I learn the skills that I need to get me in a future situation? So my first role was with the state of Indiana in a governmental accounting type of role, which then later transitioned into what I do now.
Mm-hmm. For me, it was huge for me to find not only a role, but a company that core values aligned with my own. A company that empowered their associates and invested in growth and development. I knew I wanted to not necessarily just clock in, clock out for the day, but really learn and develop in a role and be able to grow within a company. And then also a company that does what it says that they're going to do and invests in their local community too and gives back to the community. That was really important for me as well.
I'm going to give a real talk answer here. When I was graduating in marketing, especially, most marketing jobs were getting eliminated at that time. It's always one of the first places that, you can cut people or furlough in this environment right now. So for me, I kind of lowered all my expectations. And it really was about finding a job. I knew my student loans were going to come up still and all these different things, and I needed to buy a new car and all that. So for me, it really was about finding a job and then reframing for myself that I could learn still in a role, regardless, that there's a lot of just personal dynamics, how to work in an environment that's different. I had a lot of internships and did a lot of part-time work, but, transitioning into that first full-time role, the expectations are different of you, the responsibilities are different. And so there was still a tremendous amount for me to learn. And I just kept reminding myself that this isn't forever. This is me getting my first job. It's getting my feet wet. There's still a ton to learn and establish and build confidence in myself. And when the market got better, I was able to use that experience and leverage that in order to get a job that I, wanted more, that paid better, et cetera. So for me, it really was just reframing what it meant to have that first role. And that, now I had a year and a half worth of experience, and now I'm not a new grad. I'm a grad with a year and a half of experience, and a lot of employers, especially in marketing, they somehow want you to have all this experience, but they want to pay you as a brand new employee, especially in marketing roles. And so for me, having that year and a half of experience working as a marketing coordinator for a law firm, I was able to, I was more professional. I knew a lot more of how to talk to, lawyers or, leadership there, as well as how to work with the front desk people in a different way. And, I knew more about HR and how to, navigate my benefits and, what that all looked like. And so when I went to accept my second role, I had all of this other kind of soft experience that I was able to leverage for a role that fit me a lot better.
That's awesome. I love that term, reframing. I think that is a huge idea, just for anybody really, whether you're going in the first role or transitioning. It's a great thing to have.
Yeah, that's a great point, Karen. I know I was under the impression when I first was getting ready to graduate, I thought I would get my first job and stay there forever and retire from that company. And gladly that wasn't the case, because to your point, each role and each path that you take, I've learned and I've developed so many new skill sets that kind of transitioned me to that next role and that next position. So.
I can share a little bit on my experience with that question. So when I was looking at that point in time, I'd already had a couple jobs to that. So I wasn't a recent grad. I was getting my grad degree at night. And actually the job that I was in was one of the first industries that really was impacted heavily with that recession because I was recruiting people. So I had clients that I was placing people at, one moment, and then the next moment, hey, do you do outplacement? We're about to let go of 3,000 people. I had already kind of started the process of networking and kind of knew a little bit about and was honest with myself with, hey, I want to try to go down this road. It's a little bit more towards a marketing focus, but I didn't have a marketing background. I had more of a sales background. So I knew that I was more than likely going to have to get in a company through selling, but I really wanted to look for a company that, hey, it's my third stop. I learned a lot along the way, and I built up my skills and some experience, and I could speak to a lot of things directly in the interview process. But I wanted a company that I knew it's like, hey, I could come in this way, and there's going to be more opportunities for me to grow within it. And I'd worked at that point in time for a very large company and a very small company. So I kind of liked more of the smaller company feel. Which back then, Angie's List only had 300 employees.
Oh, wow.
And I knew some people from grad classes that worked there. So it is truly a company I would have never thought of in a million years if I'd have just tried to do my own research and that sort of thing, because I just wasn't their consumer at that point in time. But I hear some people who worked there tell me all these great things, say, hey, we're hiring like crazy. We're growing during this time. Now 10 years later, exactly what I hoped would happen happened. We grew exponentially, had the opportunity to have a couple different promotions, really expand my skill set. So I knew that, I had to go in this way, but there was opportunity to still grow within that company.
That's wonderful.
If I could, you said the third stop was kind of where you landed for a while. I think that's an interesting thing to kind of consider, because my job I ended up in for a really long time that I was very happy and loved the company and it fit my values and I was getting paid what I expected to get paid out of school was my third stop. And so I think that that's kind of an important thing to just let everyone know here too, is that, again, it's your first stop doesn't have to be your forever stop. And that third stop really is kind of a point where you're starting to get quite a bit of experience. You have a lot more to offer. You have more to negotiate as well. And so just keeping that in mind, that as it's hard right now, and that your first role isn't what you expected, probably it may not be, but that third stop could be. I was at that company for 4.5 years. And then one of the chief strategy officer had started a side business through that company. And he asked me to move to Los Angeles, start an international research division. And I was doing something completely different, but working for the same person. And now I've worked for him for over 8 years in 2 different companies. And so, and I got to, when I switched companies, it was like, I got to write my own rules because he was asking me to come, right? So, never feel like you're going to be stuck.
I love that. You're never married to that first role, right? Very cool.
Interestingly enough, this was also a similar experience for me. My third stop is where I've been for the last 8 years and where I'm thriving. And so I think it's important to have the right mindset when you go into the first and second stop. Not that, okay, I got to get through this to get to the next thing, but to really take what you can from it, to build your skills, to build your network, to continue to do all the things that you're doing now as a student, but to continue to grow and to do your best at what you're doing and kind of bloom where you were planted, but know that, hey, I don't have to be here forever.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Sounds like the magic number 3 is what we're all talking about here. I love it. I wanted to ask a little bit about what you felt personally helped you stand out when you were job searching at the same time others might have been doing their job search.
I think being fully prepared. I woke up before I had a job upon graduation. I woke up and got ready for the day. And I remember sitting down at my apartment table and practicing and having friends and family members review my resumes and do mock interviews and utilize all of those resources so that when I went in, I had the confidence of, I know what I have to offer and where I can make an impact. And then going back to really doing your due diligence and the research on the company and the position that you're going for, and understanding what the goals of the company are, and then what you have to offer to provide the impact in that role.
I'd say research is a big part of it. You know, I want to know more about that company than the person interviewing me is always my goal. You know, I want to know what were their last 15, 20 LinkedIn posts. You know, did they, you know, have they had anything big going on that I can, you know, bring into conversation and just make it, you know, really seem like I'm already a part of the team. And so that's always my goal. And it always is, I'm interviewing young people, I can tell when it's going to be a good interview within those first couple of minutes because they've done their homework. And when they come prepared, I soften a lot and I'm like, okay, like this is going to be a really easy conversation. It's going to be back and forth and it's not going to be so much of me just talking. You know, it's really hard in interviews when it's mostly me just giving information versus them asking me anything without them really understanding what we do. So just them having a point of view of what the company does in your own words, I think is really helpful. It has definitely always set me apart. You know, I've had several people when I've interviewed in the past that are, oh, I didn't actually realize that we did that, or we, you know, something like that, you know, that may have been out in press or something, you know, and so, you know, being able to do that and show that you are really serious and that you're already diving in is going to set you apart from a lot of your peers.
And I think the question part of that's huge, and going into the research and being prepared. I go into even meetings nowadays, I have lists of questions, and I think to know that it's okay to have your portfolio out and run through those questions. It's as much an interview for you, for the company, as it is for them, for you in that role.
Yeah,
oh, go ahead, Melissa.
I completely agree and echo all the things that said there. And for me, it was definitely I was extremely comfortable in the interview process. Which I think when you're interviewing in a tougher economy, there's more pressure. You just have to do really well in all your interviews, you know, a little bit before you get the next one. Yeah, definitely being prepared, you know, and one thing I do whenever I'm interviewing someone is I always write down every single question that I'm asked, because you just learn a lot about somebody when they are asking you questions. You know, it shows if they're prepared, or if they're just kind of going through the motions. So you learn a lot through that process. And I was definitely very prepared when I was going through it.
I think another important part of that interview preparation process is knowing and really taking the time to reflect on what sets you apart from other students. So for me, it was having that elevator pitch, you know, that first question, hey, tell me about yourself, being confident in that answer and knowing, hey, this is what Melissa brings to the table. I worked full time while I was in school. I was involved in student organizations. I'm, you know, a natural leader, you know, whatever your elevator pitch might be, know that, be confident in it, and really bring that to the table. You know, it's not braggy. They want to hear about your accomplishments, and it kind of sets the interview off at a good point if they know, okay, you know, Melissa's prepared. She knows what she knows what she's going to bring to the table. Now let's continue further and see if this is a good fit.
I think that's a really good point, Melissa, to talk about. It's not bragging. I mean, you are kind of selling yourself. It is important for you to talk about your highlights. I think that, you know, we're mostly good Midwestern folks, and, you know, it's not what you're supposed to do, talk about yourself, right? But that is your time to do it. You know, you worked hard, like you put the years in at school, you did the internships or other jobs or whatever it may be. You know, you volunteered, you were a part of student organizations, whatever it may be. And there's a lot that you can learn from somebody if they, you know, even things like, you know, the good project management skills or, you know, time management skills. There's so many things that can be learned from, you know, understanding how you juggled, what you were involved in. You know, there's a ton that you can kind of get from that elevator. So really being prepared, I think, is smart. And I love the reminder that it's not bragging. I think that that's really important for all of you to keep in mind there. And I did want to go back to the questions part of this, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
The questions part too, you know, I think Eric had a lot of great points. You can also show how much research you've done by the questions you ask. So when you, and you also, if you're thinking about the business, that's when I'm always really impressed with people, is they're not just asking me like, well, what would I do in this role? Or what would a day in the life of this role, person in this role be? Those are the kinds of things that I'm like, everyone asks me that. For me, it's like, what are some of those more unique questions that you can ask that are also about the business? So I got a question recently, that it's, I know you guys are working on X, Y, and Z, and this role would be doing this, but, where do you see, how do you see growth in a year from now? Or, I know that, you guys use this type of, social media for your research. How are you integrating TikTok into your research as it's a new social platform? So it's like, you're really already thinking about their business. And I'm always blown away when I get those kinds of questions. I'm like, all right, like, I see you, like, and so, thinking about it in that way too, that the type of questions you have, that there's some depth to them and showing that you've done your research. I had one recently, as we were acquired, and someone wanted to understand how that impacted our culture. And I was like, that's a really great question, because, they're thinking about it in a bigger way and how they're going to fit into, your organization.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear all of those points brought up. Questions, I think, are one of the biggest parts of the interview, where you get to kind of flip the script a little bit, right? And ask those questions.
Mm-hmm.
We got a really great question actually in the chat, and so we'll ask it here. This student is interested in how to highlight your resume and the accomplishments on it without coming off as braggy. He's interested in what ways have you phrased particular accomplishments in order to come off as just that, those strong accomplishments.
I would say leveraging some of the key words of your strengths that really show impact, not necessarily your day-to-day activities or your, listing out things, but how you can show impact or how you have demonstrated impact in that.
Mm-hmm. I think saying things like I was able to collaborate, where it sounds more, that you're talking about it, but it was an experience. I had the opportunity to have an experience doing this, or I had the opportunity to work at this place. So maybe using some of those types of words where it doesn't feel quite as much like, I was the guy, even if, or if you were in organizations, I really enjoyed, my opportunity to volunteer in this group. And, or if you're talking about, they ask you like, what's an example of a time you did this? I feel like my volunteer experience at Riley Children's Hospital allowed me to, and then you can talk about some of those braggy things, but you're also like setting it up as like, that you understand that you were grateful for that opportunity, that you worked for that, that you worked hard for that. I learned, saying things like, I learned a lot from this experience, that I think is applicable to this question, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the STAR method, so situation, task, action, result in interviews. And so, I always encourage people, think about what you're applying for. What are going to be the most important aspects of that job? That's what that person's going to want to hear, that, I feel like this person can do it. It's like, it's a lot easier to say, oh yeah, well they did this, which is applicable in some way to this job that they're going to have. And especially when you're just getting started in your career, you may not have some things that are dead set in there unless you had a very applicable internship for a specific role. You may have to kind of show a little bit more about kind of what you're made of. If you're a hard worker, if you're a good communicator, you're going to be able to fit into a lot of different roles. So, I think not just kind of regurgitating, words that you think they want to hear, but like back it up, so like, hey, yeah, I have strong communication skills and I did this in this role that I had. Situation, task, action, result, succinct, practice it, and then, you're helping kind of lead that person into, how you fit into their.
Excellent. Thanks.
So one final thought would be to take it as a forward-looking option. So I'm really excited to bring this experience that I had to your to your role or to this other experience, and come from a sense of confidence, authentic, but then also that enthusiasm of the future. And so it's like, hey, I'm really excited that I was able to accomplish this, but I'm really even more excited about what's next. And I think working with your company or in this role or in this specific environment could help really utilize all this hard work that I've done and these accomplishments that I bring to the table.
That's excellent. Thank you all. And yet another great question from the audience. They had a question. We're going to kind of harken back to our LinkedIn conversation. And in particular, they're interested in knowing about how to reach out to someone cold on LinkedIn. What are some of the best messages that you've had come to you, especially when they understand it's hard when you're reaching out cold. You don't maybe know this person, and that's the beauty of LinkedIn. What do you guys think?
First, if at all possible, do not have a cold introduction. So LinkedIn has an option for requesting an introduction to someone. So find a mutual contact, even if it's a second or third, and have those cold contacts with, hey, Karen, I noticed you're connected with my friend Jamie, and I wanted to connect with you, and then kind of build that relationship, and then connect with the final person by requesting that introduction through that LinkedIn feature, because I think that's going to be a way that you can really, again, show that you're being innovative in your communication and you're taking the initiative that you need to get to that step. And then it also just kind of softens it. If I get a cold email, I may not pay as much attention to it as if it's like, hey, a friend of Karen Woods wants to connect with you because Karen and I, graduated together and we know each other.
If you don't have anyone that you're maybe connected with, I would say, and if you're applying for a role, most of the time you're applying through a site or something like that at this point, unless it's a pretty small company. So, I think you could also say, like, would love to connect with you. I applied to your role through your site. Very excited to talk to you about this and, show you how discuss how I'm the best fit for this role or something like that. And then, connecting with them where it is a bit more tailored if you don't have that connection, which would definitely be the first place you want to go.
Yeah, and just to build off that a little bit, Karen, would be to have that personalized message, highlighting what drew you to that particular position or that company, mentioning kind of something that did catch your attention and something that you're excited about to learn more of.
We have Shelly in the chat here saying definitely leverage the Kelley network because we have over 117,000 living alumni. That is a lot of people that we can start tapping. Even if they don't, aren't directly connected with a company, they may have someone they can, wiggle a string and get us over there. So thank you for that, Shelly.
Yeah, and I actually, I was serving on a volunteer group where I actually was connected to Shelly and realized that we were both Kelley alums. So you never know where you will run into them.
Absolutely.
Yes. I actually was in Paris and someone had a Kelley alumni backpack. You really don't know where you're going to run into them. But, what I did here too, and I think you guys should take advantage of is, you should be connecting with all of us, today. It's like, we're all here. We know who you are. You send me a message on LinkedIn that's like, hey, I really enjoyed the panel today. Would love to connect with you. You never know, and so I'm of course would be happy to accept anybody here. So every opportunity that you have, making sure that you're following through with your LinkedIn connections and things, because you don't know in 5 years from now how those older connections may, bring you back. And you can even say like, hey, you remember 5 years ago when you were on that alumni panel? Well, I'm getting ready to do my third stop and I really want to connect with you, for this role or whatever it might be. And I've had people do that and it's great. I've had where I spoke to freshmen actually in the past as they were trying to figure out what they wanted to do. And it was amazing to now watch them 4 and 5 years later get those first roles and staying connected and, liking each other's posts and things like that. So I would definitely encourage you guys to connect with us, potentially even connect with each other, because all of you here, can they see each other or no?
Yeah, they can. They can all see everyone in here.
Potentially connect with each other too, because you're all evidently in the same situation if you're here today. So connecting with each other too, because you don't know where your network can potentially spiral out. So definitely taking advantage of that Kelley network. And if you are going to reach out to someone at a company, seeing if you do have anybody that is, maybe they did go to Kelley. There's a lot of ways that you can search through LinkedIn to find those alumni too, that may be in certain roles. And so if you do have to go out cold, maybe you reach out to one of them and your message can be about like, that we have this in common already, and there is, the brand of Kelley. I mean, the reason I would guess that you're all here is because that is a brand in itself. Everyone knows of Kelley School of Business. And there's a certain credibility that is already built there if you do reach out to an alumni. I always am so excited when I get a resume from a Kelley person. They're for sure getting an interview with me. Like they immediately are going to get an interview if they've come from Kelley.
Great to know.
Just using the term networking, I think is such a naturally almost disarming word too. Like I know in my career, I've just had a period of time where I'm like, I'm just kind of amazed that I actually got this meeting to talk to this person. I mean, I was an executive recruiter for a while in my early 20s. And I was talking to some CEOs of some major corporations because I just said, hey, I just want to network with you on some stuff I'm working on. And, that immediately takes them out of, well, this person's going to try to sell me something, sell themselves into a job. This person's just asking for help and is curious. And everybody has been at that point in their career. That's one thing that's just universal with everybody that's ever worked somewhere. So just coming at it with that can really help. And sometimes, you may get the answer that, hey, you know what, based on where we're at with our hiring, like, you just wouldn't have a chance to get over here right now, but I know somebody. Why don't you reach out to so-and-so? And now your list of one just turned into a list of 2 or 3 conversations. And then you've built that up for, okay, now I still want to work for this company. I had to take this job. I'm going to stay in touch with this person and just wait for the timing to be right.
That's awesome. Thank you, guys. I'm kind of curious, just because we're on the networking conversation, and understanding that it's not just getting the contacts, but then maintaining the relationship. And we talked briefly about this, but what are some tactics that you have done to maintain relationships? Do you have any methods or ways that you've organized information?
I think mine has been just the follow-ups and connecting with people after that initial connection. You may find different opportunities, groups that you're involved in. I mean, I've gone out with a happy hour with coworkers where someone else was invited and I've made a connection there. And then going back to sending that LinkedIn follow-up and having that professional connection from a social standpoint. And then, I mean, I've handwritten thank yous to people. I've sent a bag of candy to someone that I found out it was their favorite candy. Hey, thanks for the conversation. I love Skittles too. But just having that personal interaction and keeping it going. Most of the people that I have connected with, it's grown and it's developed over time, and we've learned and gotten to share different experiences moving forward.
I would agree the most important thing is the second or the third connection over time, because it's very easy and I think natural to make that first connection. Hopefully everyone feels empowered to make that first connection, but it's thinking, okay, I don't need something from this person right now, but I'm going to stay connected to them. Maybe you see something, an article that's relative to their industry, and you say, hey, I saw this and thought you might think it's interesting given your role at XYZ. Just wanted to touch base and say hi, without a need. If the only time you ever reach out to someone is to ask them for something, that's not a two-way relationship. And so you want to kind of think of it like you would in any relationship, find the right cadence of touch points and just continue to maintain that relationship. If it's every 6 months, if it's, however frequent you deem necessary, I think that's the most important part.
I like that a lot, Melissa. I think I did that a lot with my first supervisor I ever had. I knew she loved Christmas, and every year she gets a Christmas card. So it's a once a year kind of thing, but give her a quick update. Someone that really had an impact on my career, certainly. That's great. Well, I want to ask another question here. And it looks like our chat feel free to continue to ask questions. But I wanted to see if, as you were job searching, especially knowing things were uncertain, did you ever have to search outside of the Indianapolis market to find a position, or were you able to do that if that was part of your plan?
Actually, my first role actually was a company based in Huntington Beach, California. Indiana was part of my territory. I was a sales manager. I actually some environmentally friendly plastic bags, believe it or not. So I was selling plastic grocery bags over a 5-state territory for my first job. But the company was actually based out of California. It wasn't what I had intentionally started looking for. I was looking here local. And a company headquartered here locally. But I quickly realized that being able to adapt a little bit and expand that search, I was still able to reside in the Indianapolis area and learn more about different areas as well.
I ultimately took a job in Indiana, but I leveraged the Kelley network both in Indy and also in Bloomington. I don't know if that's still allowed for the students, but I went to the Kelley Career Fair there in Bloomington because I knew there were other companies that were based outside of Indianapolis, and I interviewed with, Kroger out of Cincinnati and places and pockets of the country where I knew that I had, friends or family or would be interested in living. Ultimately, I ended up staying in Indy because that was what was best for me with family and everything. But I was definitely expanding. I think Karen hit the nail on the head with the first question, expanding, reframing the expectations, and really getting a wider population than what maybe you would have originally intended to do, and just being flexible.
Definitely. And yes, to answer your question, students are allowed to go down to the Bloomington campus or come to Indianapolis to attend any career fairs. We advertise those to every student, so take advantage of that.
So I'm from Illinois originally. When I was first getting started my career, I interviewed in Illinois, a lot of Chicago, and had a family member that lived in Indianapolis. So I was interviewing 2 different states and took the opportunity here in Indy because I thought it just offered the most growth. Like the city, and I just kind of saw myself longer term. Indy's more my speed than Chicago, just personal thing for me. But one thing that I think is very important to think about too is there are certain areas of the country that are better for certain types of careers than others. So if you're thinking about, you want to get into tech, Indy's become a great tech hub. There are other cities that are great for tech. When I was getting out of grad school, I had a little period of time where I thought about getting into consumer packaged goods. And I knew from prior experience that there are hubs for consumer packaged goods in certain parts of the country over others. So, when I was starting that search, I knew, well, I'm probably going to have to move to either this part of the country or that part of the country, which is ultimately what helped me decide to, no, I don't want to do that. I want to focus more on the location, hopefully find a company that fits what I'm looking for here locally. But that's an important thing to think about too. You can kind of sometimes get to a really cool company, but it's kind of out on an island where, if something happens with that role or that company, you're going to have to move potentially because, there's just not a lot of other jobs for what that specifically does in the area. So.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm hearing right now is making sure that you have, it sounds like friends, family, if you've been to those certain locations is definitely an influencing factor. Thanks for bringing that up, Eric.
Yep.
All righty. So a couple of questions kind of on the resiliency side of things. I'm really interested in how you kept motivated in your job search, especially when you might have been facing a lot of rejection or even sometimes just not hearing back from a particular employer when you maybe submitted an application.
I'm a huge perfectionist, so I struggle with a non-job offer would seem like a failure to me. So I think really right from the get-go, kind of checking my mindset and redirecting it and thinking of it not necessarily as a rejection, but a redirection. And that ultimately I wasn't supposed to be in that role is kind of how I thought of it. And there was a reason that I was being redirected to a different path.
I think making sure you're not taking it personally as much as possible, knowing that, you know, logistically, especially if you're applying for a role in a large company, they could be getting hundreds of applications, and you don't know who maybe has a connection there, if they're going to hire from within, but they have to post the job. There's a lot of factors that go into a job posting, that, you know, it likely has nothing to do with you being a perfectly qualified person or knowing you're prepared and that kind of stuff. So I would just say, as much as you can, not taking it personal. If you are really interested in that job or that role, you know, potentially applying for other roles that aren't the perfect role at that same company, if you really want to be there, and know that, you know, once you get in, you'll be able to move around quite a bit, would be a pretty good expectation, you know. And so, you know, maybe broadening yourself there. It's applying for 3 or 4 roles that you qualify for, and you don't know, you know, when one of those is gonna stick, or maybe you're not the 100th applicant, you're the 4th applicant, you know. And so, you know, just remembering that from the hiring side of it, they're getting inundated with applications, especially in a market like this where there's going to be fewer and fewer jobs. So really trying not to take it personally or that it's rejection.
I think a good point too to bring up is, if the opportunity is there based off of the situation that you're in, or if you've had an interview already, is asking for feedback and inquiring about what could I have done differently or said differently, or what type of experience are you looking for more of in the future for me to reapply, or have some more insight on that. I think feedback, some of us sometimes get intimidated to ask for feedback, and I know we've all heard that feedback is a gift, but really, really believing that and wanting and craving that to develop.
I did that when I was interviewing, and I got some really constructive feedback. It was hard. It was hard to hear because I felt like I was so prepared for this interview. But he told me that I wasn't giving concise answers. I was kind of like, I was just rambling and trying to give as much information as I could because I thought that was the best way. But then it kind of got us off course. And so that was really valuable feedback for me, is to be a bit more intentional. It's also okay if they ask you a question and you take a second and just say, oh, I want to think about that for 1 second. You know, that's fine. Like but for me, it was great that I got that feedback, because all my future interviews, I made sure that I was looking him in the eye and I was more deliberate about what I was saying. I was concise in my response, and very deliberate in what I was saying.
I would agree with that. I think that failing fast and taking feedback and failure as kind of synonymous. So if you fail at something, that's just another data point. So that job didn't work out because of XYZ, or that interview wasn't a good match because of, this other variable. And so getting that information, processing it, and then taking that connection that you made, keeping it, maintaining that relationship, coming back to it in the future if it makes sense, or saying, hey, I learned something and now it's on to the next. It's easy to say this now that we're all at our third stop or happily employed, a decade later, but trying to have that mindset of, I would rather be rejected and learn something and make a connection and know kind of where I stand and have that feedback, than to not try and to always wonder, or to just be paralyzed by inaction and indecision and fear.
Yeah, I think one of the worst things that can happen for a candidate in an interview is to leave a meeting not knowing what that person really kind of thinks of you. And it happens all of the time. You get people that come out, oh, I think the interview went pretty well. And then, on the other side of the door, you've got someone, oh boy, that's a definite no. It does. It really happens all the time. And when I was a recruiter, I would hear both sides of it, because I would get feedback from the hiring manager and feedback from the candidate. And so many times, the people that are, long in their career, this happens to. So I always encourage, and I've done this in every one of my interviews, whenever I interview, is, the last question you should ask should always be, they say asking for the job, but, asking, if there's anything about the conversation, about your background, do you have any concerns? Give yourself a chance to sell yourself that last time. If they're a good interviewer, if they're honest, they'll say, well, here's what I like, here's what I'm concerned about. I just don't know if you would be able to do X. And be honest with yourself. And, sometimes you're going to have to say, yeah, I don't have that. Here's where I think that I do have the applicable experience. Is that a deal breaker? And if something, a lot of times they'll say something that, oh, no, I can absolutely do that. And give yourself a chance to tell them why you think you can do that. And now you're not leaving that meeting thinking, hey, I put myself out there, we put on the table, and now it's just up to them to decide, if it was a deal breaker, if they think that, no, you can't fit into that role or not.
That's
I
great.
agree. I always ask the same question at the end of every interview. Is there anything about this conversation that has you concerned or that I can help clarify or that you have a doubt? And they're either going to reinforce like, no, you're amazing, or I don't know, let me think through it, I'll get back to you. Or if they're a good interview, like Eric said, they're going to give you, that hint of doubt that then you can come back and say, that's great. I've actually had challenges with that, and here's how I've overcome it, or here's why I don't think that's going to be an issue, but I, appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, and I made the mistake of not asking that question in my first several interviews right after graduation. It seemed aggressive to me, and it seemed very in your face. And now, Eric and Melissa, I asked that at the end of everything. Are there any red flags? Are there any concerns from our conversation that prevent me moving forward to the next round? And I think once you do it, and once you say it for the first time, then it's like, how did I not say this in every single interview? And like Eric said, walk out the door knowing where you stand.
Something that, also may feel a little aggressive or assertive is once you do get to sort of the final rounds, is asking potentially, what do the other candidates have that you're not sure if I do? What makes you still, why are you still interviewing these other people? Like, what have I not been able to convince you of that I'm the right person? Because they may say, well, this person has experience doing this. Well, I have experience doing that. I didn't realize that was important to you, or that I should say it, or I need to convey that a bit more. And so that's always if you can do it, it's tough. It's tough to ask that kind of question, but more often than not, you're really going to get some good insight into what they're looking for. And you may be able to, explain how their concerns, again, those red flags, and what they feel like maybe you don't have, you might be able to, make them more confident in you.
Agree. And if not, then you take that as feedback, and you want to make sure you're prepared for the answer, because the answer might be, actually, I do have concerns, and maybe it's something that you don't have in your back pocket that you can pull out, having the right mindset to say, okay, this is great feedback. Now I know what skill I need to go develop and what thing I need to accomplish. Maybe you're not completely out of the running, but take that as feedback and really, keep in touch with that person and keep that kind of stairwell going.
Yeah.
Another great part of this too is that you may learn that that person has more experience than you do, or they may have worked in a similar company and have done this role that you haven't directly done, or maybe they went to school for this certain thing, or they have this special certificate or something. And those are types of things that you're like, all right, this is at this point in my career, these are a bit out of my hands. So if they get this job, like, I can understand that was really something that was important to them. If I want to apply for a role like this in the future, maybe I need to look into that certificate too, for example, or maybe I need to work through more experience with this. Is there something in my current role that could help me get that experience? Is there something that I could be doing in my current job to be able to flex that muscle, build that muscle, and that's just going to prepare you in the future. So it gives you a bit more understanding of where you can build yourself, and also if you do get the no sorry email, thank you for interviewing with us, a little bit more why that person probably got picked over you, and you're not thinking about it as like a lack of yourself, but just that candidate was more, a better fit.
Yeah. I think that's such a great point, because then you almost get an insight into things you have no control over. You get a little glimpse, even if it's just, a small bit. Well, we had one more question come in the chat here, and I think this may be one of our final questions. We'll see. And I get this question a lot in appointments, so I'm glad someone brought it up. it's this person's asking if it looks bad if you apply to too many positions at a given company. Should you just apply for one, or should you apply for all that you see and are qualified for?
Yeah, so I'll share my opinion on it at least. I think that when it comes down to applying for multiple positions at a company, I think it all comes down to what are the roles. Because I do think you can apply to too many if you're just applying for everything. You know, you shouldn't be applying for a role that at the end of the day you're not interested in, / you have absolutely no applicable experience, and it's something that you're absolutely have some applicable experience. You know, you shouldn't be, if you were a marketing major and you hated accounting, and you have no interest in accounting, you shouldn't apply to be an accountant, you know? And I've seen people do that. Like, you know, there's 50 jobs, they apply for every single one of them. You know, so I do think that depending on what you ultimately want to do, the answer to that can absolutely be yes. Now, that being said, if there are multiple positions at a company that have some cross-functional type of applicable experience that you think, hey, I could do all these, I'd have an interest in all these, I just want to get my foot in the door, then no, you can't apply to too many if they're at least showing that you have an end game in mind and it's something that you would actually want those jobs. And I'll just say something from my own experience, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily a strategy that everyone should do, but it's kind of who I am and it worked for me. But I actually declined my first job offer at Angie's List. I applied for multiple jobs. At that point in time, I knew myself pretty well. I'd done different types of things. I knew that one type of selling was just not me. It's just not how I'm wired, whereas another type of selling is me. And so I got my foot in the door through the one role, had a great conversation. They made me an offer within 24 hours. And I just was real honest with the guy. And I said, hey, I love working for you. You know, this is a great job. I'm really into your company. I just know that I'd also apply for this. And this is just going to be better fit for both sides. Like, just being real honest with you. And that person, fortunately for me, took that information the right way and said, yeah, you know what? I get it. I'd love to have you, but I'm not going to be selfish. I know the hiring manager for that position really well. I'm going to send you along. Next day, I had an interview with that person. Within a few days, I was hired for that role. So, so that's just my personal experience and thought on it.
Honesty is the best policy, right?
Right. Yep.
I think if you are going to apply for multiple roles within the same company is making sure you're still tailoring your resume to those specific roles. And if you are going to have something, if you do decide to include a cover letter or anything like that, you know, to making sure that's tailored to that role, you know, so your experiences, so it is a little bit different. So if the same HR person is reading it, you know, multiple times, it still looks like it's for that and not just, you know, Karen applying for every single role we have here. And then also to Eric's point, I was actually recently just checking out what was going on in Indianapolis in terms of hiring. And I had a role that I got offered and realized that the same kind of thing. It was like, this isn't the right role. And she was wonderful. I mean, she was like, yep, that makes sense. Like, totally get it. And she's like, and she told me about another role that was potentially available. And she's like, we don't know where this is going to be yet. And then we went into, you know, quarantine. But you know, we've stayed connected, you know, and it was a great conversation. And she knew that I was very passionate about the company and now will be a reference, you know, if I do apply for something else. So, you know, having that, showing that, you know, you're really being thoughtful for yourself and making sure it's going to be a good fit actually typically translates really well.
Good deal.
I think if there's a company that has multiple roles that you're interested in, this is another kind of idea or an excuse for you to reach out to the hiring manager or a recruiter for that company. Hey, I noticed that there's 3 roles. There's some crossover. I'm interested. Can we sit down or have a virtual chat to figure out, you know, what the differences of the roles are, just so I can make sure I'm applying for the one that's going to be the best fit. And then again, you're asking someone to help, you're showing an interest, and it's not, you know, all about getting that interview. It's about getting the information that you need, but then that's going to translate to that interview and making sure it's the right one.
I think that's great, Melissa.
Yeah, absolutely. Snaps to that. Well, I do want to be conscious of our time, and wow, we could probably continue this conversation for another 2 hours, but I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we will have this recording up here in a couple of hours, and all of our panelists, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you sharing all of your words of wisdom, and I'll certainly be in touch if you would like to stay in contact with Kelley. I will talk to you about how that can happen. So thank you all again, and have a wonderful afternoon and a happy Friday.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.